Your test list.
Okay, I'd like to call the November 13th, 2024 Board of Selectmen's meeting to order. I know we're a little bit early, but I think we've had enough time to look at the different options. If somebody asks a question and you want to look at something, feel free to go back out to the easels and take a look at the intersections. We're going to take public comment. We'll try to answer any questions you have and have a general discussion. To start things off, I want to kind of give you a little history and background of how this started. In 2007, the Route 28 from Pickering Corner to Pleasant Valley Road was in deplorable shape with large potholes where the concrete 10-foot slab paving base was causing constant potholes. Article 24 of the 2010 warrant, voters were asked to approve $99,000 to study the Route 28 corridor to have a design to support the Route 28 project being placed back on the state's 10-year plan. It was on it and then had come off. Starting in September 2010 and going through May of 2011, the town held 3 public forums to review and discuss several alternative designs developed by Stantex for the Route 28 corridor, and it's similar to what you're seeing right now. In May 2011, a Route 28 steering committee was formed by the Board of Selectmen. That committee held 2 public hearings on the different designs. The steering committee provided to the Board of Selectmen a report labeled the Route 28 Corridor Preliminary Project Planning Report, and the Board of Selectmen approved it on July 2018. The board sent a letter to New Hampshire DOT, the Department of Transportation, in September 2018, stating that Wolfeboro is defined by its traditional New England character and the presence of Lake Winnipesaukee and Lake Wentworth, scenic vistas such as that at the existing Pickering Corner intersection in New Hampshire Route 109 and 28 define the gateway to our core village. Then it went over to New Hampshire DOT. New Hampshire DOT asked that the town establish an advisory committee, which we did, and the committee met on December 5th, 2019, and then came COVID, and everything stopped, and that committee met again in July 2021. In February of 2023, New Hampshire DOT held a public information meeting to discuss the traffic modeling simulations. And that's where we are. We've had a number of other meetings, but that brings us up to today, why we are here. The board did sit down and took a look at the different options, and that is the matrix which you have here talking, and it'll tell you how many parking spaces, what we felt was important, things that we wanted to make sure we made comments about. At the bottom, you can see the vote. Let's say mini build, there were 2 that preferred it, 1 was okay, and 2 thought it was a poor choice. And you go across the bottom, that was a vote of the Board of Selectmen trying to get an idea of where we all stood on the different options. And that's why we're here to hear from you tonight. I would like you to state your name for the record. It'll help our secretary do the minutes, even though I know, thank you for signing in. So anybody who would like to come up to the microphone, make a comment, ask a question, please do so. Going to be a short meeting.
Yeah. Linda, is there? Do you have anything to read?
I will read that when I'm ready.
Okay.
Well, I'll jump in there.
Thank you.
My name is Steve Johnson. Lived in Wolfeboro my whole life. Traffic has always been an issue, especially in the summertime. I don't think any of the proposals that are presented tonight by the state will do anything to alleviate.
Steve, can you bring that
Yeah, we can't
microphone
hear you.
closer to you because it's
I'll
hard?
stand closer to it.
Ah, you got
Thank
it.
you. So I think none of the proposals will alleviate any of the downtown issues as far as traffic goes. I think the roundabout at the top of Brickyard Hill, Pickering Corner, I think when I view the roundabout at 171 and 28, I used to go there to work pretty much every day. And if you've got the main route of traffic, which would be 28 in that case, similar here, North Main Street and South Main Street rather, that would be the major traffic flow. If you've got cars that are bumper to bumper going through a turnaround like that, the people coming up Brickyard Hill are just not going to be able to get in because you're not going to be able to. People are not going to give access to the people coming up Center Street. I have been in favor of a stoplight, which a lot of people aren't, but I think that would give better access to the people coming up Center Street that want to access South Main or Main Street. The other thing is having a roundabout at McManus Road. I can see why they would put it forth. Again, proof is in the pudding. I don't think that's a solution. You're going to run into the same issue where you have most of the traffic coming through on Route 28 coming into town and leaving town. They may or may not stop to give people coming out of McManus Road access. So that would be my fear. So that's my opinion.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks.
Good evening. My name is Dan Ross, 31 Red Brook Circle. While I fully understand the need to rebuild this stretch of Route 28 and to improve the pavement and the drainage, I am opposed to the additional construction of the rotaries and bike lanes. And similar to what Steve was saying, I don't believe that adding rotaries are going to do anything to mitigate the volume of traffic that we have here in Wolfeboro, especially in the peak season of the summer. I also feel that adding the bicycle lanes, if you're taking trees down and widening the road, it's going to give a totally different appearance as we drive into Wolfeboro. You know, everybody enjoys the scenic view of the town as we come down 28 into downtown area. And if we have this big wide open stretch, to me it's going to resemble Route 28 coming up from Alton Circle to Springfield Point, where it's just cleared out and we have lanes on both sides. Just a couple of, and finally, regarding the Pleasant Valley Road merge and the rotary at McManus, I've been driving that section of road for 54 years myself. I've never had a problem merging out of Pleasant Valley onto South Main Street, nor turning to make my left to come back down Pleasant Valley Road. The idea of blunting the road and then not having a turning lane in either direction for the opposing traffic and for traffic to get by when you're trying to make your left back into Pleasant Valley is going to be a real problem, and it'll certainly will back up the traffic, especially during the school traffic hours. So I would like you to just consider the following points. The burden on the taxpayers by using federal, state, and local tax revenue to support the construction. The idea is that the rotaries are going to mitigate traffic congestion and the long-term disruption to the residents and visitors, what we'll have to endure during the construction period. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bobby Bedman, you knew I was jumping up after the bike lane thing. Bike lanes, we have about 1,300 children utilizing that corridor. If we can get them on bikes safely, that would be great. In our master plan, one of the biggest things in our master plan was building up our town with some more bike lanes. This gives the option. I know my husband and I, we make sure in the summer we bike into town and not bring a car, because it's really helpful to have a lot of us who can bike into town and not clog up downtown with parking. Bike lanes, please. Thank you.
Anybody else have any comments?
My name's Jody Person. I know everybody keeps talking, we've always been talking for years about trying to get maybe just try some lights. And my idea is on it that the project's not going to be started till 2027, I think. So I don't know why, like next year, the state has all the mobile lights. You can set up street lights and do everything. You could set up temporary in front of the school and temporary at the monument, and actually see how that would work for like next summer. Yeah, I mean, they could do a testing to just see if it did relieve some of it. I can understand that the road and the drainage needs to be repaired, and the sidewalks need to be repaired. I could probably understand that, and the road being repaired. But I really think trying to set up a temporary test run for 6 months with lights, I don't think it would cost that much for the state to do that. I mean, I've seen them do that all over the state. I mean, that's just one of my ideas. And then, the rotaries, the other thing is, I'm wondering, does anybody know, like, if they're gonna widen, how much property are they gonna be taking from people that own property down Main Street? Because I know at the monument, from the WO lines, 24 feet or 25 feet is the state property, and then Brewster's property. The only reason I know this is because I was trying to put my political signs up to run for selectmen, and they were taking them down at Brewster, and I actually took a while to talk to the guy at the state, and he actually told me exactly where the setback is there, but it changes on Main Street, it changes up here. But has anybody even talked about they're going to be taking people's 10 feet, 20 feet of people's property by domain, Has anybody even talked about that?
If you have been driving up and down South Main Street, they have their surveyors out now.
Yeah,
And
I
so
saw that.
I'm hoping they will get that definition for us.
And then they'll have a better idea of what
Yes.
okay.
That's my understanding.
Okay, that's it, thanks.
Yep. Anybody else?
Hi, my name's Charlie Andrews. I just have a question. First of all, thank you very much for reiterating history and all the work that's gone so far into all this, and that's really well, I appreciate that. Who ultimately gets to decide how this is going to move forward? Is this going to be something that goes to the vote, the residents of the town meeting go to vote, or is it something the Board of Selectmen is going to decide? How's that going to work? That's my question. Thanks.
At this particular time, the Board of Selectmen has talked about putting out a number of warrant articles. We haven't drawn them up. We haven't talked about how many, but I think that there is, and I will check with the board. Are we in general consensus that we plan to put out warrant articles?
Yes.
Is there anybody who is not? So that's our consensus. Where the next meeting, November 20th, we're going to start looking at warrant articles that cost money, and then we will try to draft these warrant articles. Steve, you talked to the state. Am I correct that we have to tee the end of Pleasant Valley Road?
We do. So I've actually kind of been taking notes of their questions, and I can answer
Will you do that?
a few of those. So back to the first gentleman on the bike lanes, and then to Bobby's point on the bike lanes. The bike lanes are going to go in because we're going to actually shrink the travel lane that's there now will actually get shrunk down, will help compensate and accommodate for the bike lanes. So this sheet over here actually gives you a breakdown of 11-foot travel lane and 5-foot bike lanes. And then that shows you how the shoulder offsets then with the sidewalks. So overall, we're not looking to widen the corridor. Where the widening of the corridor comes into play comes back around to moving power, how much power we have to move, where we have to move it. And that also comes into play to Jody's point of land that needs to be taken or not taken. And that is still very much up in the air at the moment. Once we have some of our questions that we have asked, which is, can we do 1-lane alternating traffic versus keeping 2 lanes open, things like that, which will narrow down the footprint of the whole project to try to maintain the overall look of the town that everybody wants to do. The next one, as far as tax money goes, right now this is all federal funding. Yes, we all still have to kick into federal funding, but there isn't any town money going into it. This is 100% from DOT to fund this. To Linda's question on the Pleasant Valley Road intersection, that's not negotiable. If that road was to be built today, that's how it would have been built. That's how it's going to have to be fixed, period. That's not going to stay the way that it is. And also by doing so, we're going to add this BMP here, which will help with a lot of the runoff and some of the issues that we're dealing with down on Russ Pond that's further down through. So by teeing this up has a lot of benefit for water quality. And I'd like to just throw in my 2 cents on a lot of this for what it's worth. Is this project is first and foremost a water quality project. So intersections are important. Absolutely, as far as deciding which ones to do and so on and so forth. But the corridor, and as it's designed, and the runoff down to those BMPs is extremely important. So those are the things we can't lose. The amount of money that DOT is going to put into this project that's going to, build that for us is huge. So it's just kind of hammering out the 2 intersections and trying to get that across the finish line.
There is a cost to the town to move the telephone poles, not in the DOT construction, but in order for them to do the construction, I think you've heard, the first look was 80 poles. Is Barry here? Barry, do you want to kind of give a little update on where you are with that so people hear that?
Good evening, Barry Muccio, Director of Operations for the Electric Department. Yeah, initially when DOT came to us, basically with that set of plans you see up back there, our directive was we had 80 poles that were in their way in order for them to make a 3rd travel lane to keep 2-way traffic. They gave us some very loose parameters on perhaps where we could move poles. And we looked at the whole corridor in-house from, I'm not going to say it's an extremely accurate perspective. It was sort of a generalized overall look of, okay, if we had to move, we'd have to move the poles here, there, where they would fit. Many of those 80 poles would need to be relocated to private property, which means easements would be required. And as well, I think the big thing with that is many of those poles we're going to have to go back 8 to 10 feet from where they exist today. And then obviously if you ride down through that corridor, you can see what 8 to 10 feet pushing poles back does to the trees also within that corridor. So that's sort of where we left it with them. They didn't really, at this point, want to give us a definitive, okay, that relocation plan will work, it won't work. I think they need to iron out some of the particulars here before they get down to where the utility poles go. But certainly an impact to us, and I don't have the estimate with me, but why am I thinking 1.6 million? Was that, yeah, but I think the one move would have been 1.6 million cost to the electric department. If we had to relocate twice to accommodate continuous 2-way traffic, and now we're not probably doubling 1.6, but we're going to be close to $3 million to relocate the poles twice. So that's what I want to avoid. We sort of put that as, that's not an option. That was our response to this. It's not an option to move twice. The inconvenience to the electric users, to the traffic, and to everybody else involved with it would just be too much, so.
Barry, am I correct that you said that when you move the poles, we can only have one lane of traffic?
And that's the other kicker in here, because that third travel lane would not be constructed prior to us relocating the poles. So even if they want to keep two-way traffic going for the road portion of the construction, we won't have that option. So we will have to have one-lane traffic while we're relocating the poles, as well as all the other utilities on the poles as well.
And a guess on how long it would take you to move all those 80 poles?
So I would think the whole thing to relocate once would be 6 to 9 months, and it would have to be a contract job. Obviously, we couldn't bite off something that big in-house. So I would think 6 to 9 months, and that's having us do all our thing. Then we have the phone company, we have the cable company, we have First Light Fiber, we have a couple other riders down there. So there's about 6 utilities that all have to move before we can remove the old pole. So
I have a question for Steve. Steve, does the state have an estimate yet for how long it will take to complete this project once they put a shovel in the ground?
No, because they're still in conceptual phase. Number one, intersections.
Yep.
What the intersections are is going to change, is going to determine construction. 2, one-lane traffic versus two-lane traffic, how that's going to shake out. I can tell you, after the last time they were here and after they spoke with Barry, and I think we made it pretty clear that we don't want to do that. And then I reiterated that, look, he's going to have a year's worth of keeping this at one-lane traffic. They've also been watching out here and how we've had this shut down to one-lane traffic for 3 months and how that has worked. And so that model is starting to take place of keeping that at one lane.
Yep.
Because we have been so vocal on the cost from Barry, the time from him, the overall look of the corridor, and not making it, there's a lot of people that compared it to Ospey and what they did in Ospey when they shifted the road over and the width on 16 now, so that it doesn't look like that. So they are taking all those things into consideration now.
And the schedule that was it's on one of their presentations that I looked at today, they're saying final plans and acquisition would be 2025 to 2027, and construction would be 2027 to 2029. And the reason we are talking today is because we've got to tell them what we want so they can design what we want. So that's why the pressure, even though it's way down the line, they need an answer from us. One-way traffic, what we want at our intersections. And so that's why we're coming back to have these public hearings. Is there anything else anybody wants to ask Barry? Yeah, Paul?
Hi, Barry. So it's probably too early to know, or maybe you do know, are these easements, are they construction easements, or we don't know this yet?
So
Could they
DOT
be
will
permanent
have,
land taking?
yeah, DOT will have some temporary construction easements in the process, but we can't be a rider on their construction easements. So it would be up to us internally to obtain those utility easements. They would be permanent.
They would be permanent.
They would have to be permanent, yes.
Okay. And then the second question is, while we're doing all this pole work, somebody's out there with chainsaws. And comment from you on the tree removal process?
So
Thoughts as to how that would work?
if you recall in my presentation, we had sort of defined, we'd have to go through even months ahead of our 2026 schedule. So we would have to, probably jump right on this in early 2026, get some of the tree trimming done to accommodate the pole relocations, because 2027 will roll up pretty quick. There would be quite a lot of trimming.
And some removal.
Some would be complete removals. In fact, most of the trimming, as I look back at it, would be complete removals where they need to be relocated, because you can't go back 8 feet without completely butchering a tree.
You could trim a tree, but the tree's going to go up into your infrastructure at some point.
You're going to be basically back to the trunk.
Something's got to give.
Yeah.
And then the replacement, that's not something that would be on the municipal electric, that would be on our taxpayer, if I remember.
So we haven't really discussed the process of replacing or how that would look. Some of that, I believe there's some of that in the budget for DOT, Steve, it's a little fuzzy.
It's a little fuzzy.
It's a little fuzzy,
A
but
little opaque.
they had made a comment at one time that some of that would be on them, but I wouldn't dare say
Like
how
how
much.
that-
So,
Thanks, Barry.
Thank you, Barry. Bill? Yeah, Barry, Bill.
Up to the mic.
You got to come up to the mic so people.
Bill Swafield from 409 South Main. If you're going to move the electric lines and the poles, you're moving them on the same side that they're on now, if you move them just once?
not necessarily, Bill. We'd have to make a couple of swaps to accommodate the layout they have.
Right.
A lot of it's going to stay in the same. Up by the high school, we'd have to swap to the high school side of the road for further. By the golf course, instead of being on the lake side, we'd have to be on the opposite side of the road there, the eastern side.
And then you're going to move them, say they're on the same side at one point, you're going to move those like 8 feet onto private property from about approximately where they are now?
In some locations, yeah.
And they'll stay there?
That will be their permanent look. That would be the intent, yeah.
So you could have some that are on people's front lawns?
The areas were proposed to be on private property, they're not on people's front lawns. There's a section from the wind drifter down to all that tree line there, all the way down to basically where the golf course. It's mostly wooded, but that would be one of the areas where private property, where it need to be on private property. So it's not going to be in anybody's front yard where that's happening, but.
I had one other comment.
Sure.
I'm right across from the high school, and so I get to see the traffic every morning and sometimes go in and out when it's traffic in the morning or the afternoon. And the gentlemen that do the trafficking control out there, waving people in and out, do a great job. I don't have a problem pulling out of my driveway if I want to come downtown in the morning. People let you out. So my feeling is for about 25 minutes in the morning, maybe 25 minutes in the afternoon, you live with the traffic. You have to wait a few minutes. People adjust their schedules as much as they can to avoid it. So the least impact for our area up there would be not to do anything and just keep it as it is and have those officers continue to monitor the traffic and help people in and out as quickly as possible during those 25 minutes twice a day. In the summer, it's no issue.
And that's what we call the minimum build.
Yeah.
So that people understand what minimum build means. It means that we're building in place. Doesn't mean that we're not doing anything. We're still addressing all the drainage issues. We're still creating sidewalks. We're still going to use the same width roadway, but have a dedicated bike lane or a lane that's a breakdown lane. So that, because there are places now that if a car breaks down, now you only have one lane left. But with this, if a car broke down, you would still be able to get cars back. You wouldn't have a backup. So a minimum build does still give us new sidewalks, new roadway, new drainage to protect the environment. It doesn't mean that we're just putting tar over the existing and leaving it. And I want people to understand that.
Yeah, and that's what the corridor design that Steve pointed out over there. And that's why we laid the corridor in the back, showing it the bike lanes going up the full length. It is going to be all those things with sidewalks, bike lanes, travel lanes. Even when we say minimum build, it means we're not going to put something at the intersection.
Right. So Steve, that top drawing there, how wide is one side to the other?
This one here, Bill?
Yes.
32 feet.
From way over one side to way over on the other?
So you've got 11-foot travel lanes, so 22 feet, and another 10 feet for bike lanes on either side. 32 feet of pavement.
And what about the sidewalks?
And then the sidewalks, there's 6-foot sidewalks, and then depending on where they are, you have some grass panels between the curb and the sidewalk in some parts of the corridor, and then in other places, the sidewalk is right on the curb line.
So the widest part of that possible drawing would be,
32 feet.
that includes the sidewalks?
No, with the sidewalks, I'm sorry. So when you add the 17, 32, 44, hang on a minute.
I think the board had decided to do the travel lane, the bike lane, and then sidewalks, and get rid of all the green stripe in between, because what happens, we plow, and what you really don't have in green is you have all the rubble from the road. So I think, am I correct, that we all agreed that that's what we're going to do, one constant look through it?
So is that one constant look wider than we see now,
It's what you see right there is what.
as opposed to what's there now?
I think the sidewalks now are only 5.
The sidewalks now are 5, they will be 6.
Okay, so you're
That's the
only
only
adding a couple of feet?
Yeah,
Yeah.
on each.
Well, and you are, but you aren't, because in places there is the green space in between, which is just gravel and dirt.
Yeah.
Linda measured some of them, and so did I. I went down and measured the road. The road, if we do a minimal build, will be about the same that it is now.
Yes.
And I want
Correct.
people to understand also that the roundabouts and enhanced striping and the streetlights will change the appearance of the town. But what will change the appearance of the town for a larger portion of this project is if we continue to use two-way traffic during the entire process of the build. Because it's like when they shift the lanes on the highways and they widen up a huge swath and then they put it back. So if we want to keep the aesthetics of the town the way it is, it means that we're going to have to suffer with traffic.
Right, if you change the poles twice, then you're not going to have as much of a problem with the
minimum-
traffic.
Yeah, and Barry would have to speak on this, but I think with a minimum build, we wouldn't be moving the poles extensively, right, Barry?
Not as many of them. I would say probably half the 80, 40 of them probably. Can you repeat his answer?
He's saying that what you want to come on up, I think it's easier for them at home.
I can sit down.
Yep.
I don't have the exact number, but I would think that it would probably cut the pole relocations in half.
How about the distance from the street? We were going to be moving them 8 feet, you thought, or about.
Yeah, well, that would be tough for me to tell you exactly without knowing what that footprint is, but I would think it would obviously lessen.
Okay, so there would be less removal of trees and things like that?
Yeah, no question.
Okay.
No question.
And we're still trying to get some answers on
Correct.
exactly
Yeah, so
what we
that's
haven't.
still
Yeah, but
progress.
if you want to look at what they can do, go to Route 16 and by Green Mountain. They didn't add a lane, but let me tell you, it's a huge, I kept on thinking, we got to have at least a turn lane there. Nothing. And so that's what is our concern coming down through this corridor. And that's why we're saying we can deal with one lane of traffic like we did out there at times. When we want to go downtown quickly, we may not be able to, but the difference in the look is going to be huge. So come on, back up, Bill. And then anybody else who'd like to come on up will.
I'm just trying to do the math in my head, which isn't working too well. If we're only adding a foot on this side and a foot on that side, on the outside of the construction, really, do we have to move that many, even half the number of poles?
Let's say this, Bill, we'll try to move as few poles as possible.
I do get it. I'd have to go look at the road and look at it. But.
We haven't gotten any real answer from New Hampshire DOT, and I think that's where Barry is a little vague. We gave them a plan of moving a whole bunch of them, and they're just kind of, I don't think they have the Carter survey. I don't think we're at that point. But I think the point from us at this town is we want as few poles moved as possible.
So Linda, so I've walked up and down several times to look, and I think the poles that Barry is probably referring to would be poles that, there are poles right now that are in the middle of the sidewalk.
Okay.
Or right on the edge of the sidewalk.
Yeah.
And for DOT to do work, they can't work around a pole. They might move it back a few feet, whatever Barry's told he needs to do. But it wouldn't be 80 poles moving 8 feet off to the side, and it would be a lot less extensive.
Yeah. And DOT is okay with us having 2 years of one-lane traffic?
You got an answer from them on that?
I did. The short answer is yes. So the big driver for them on the two-lane traffic was actually from initial feedback from the town originally. So the original conversation, even when I came on, the conversation was still two-lane traffic all the time. That was before the power pole part came into play. Right. Once the poles came into play, and then as everybody is looking at that, they kind of realized that, well, we don't want to have to, Barry doesn't want to spend 2 years moving poles. We don't want to spend the money to move poles twice or whatever. So they are looking at a kind of a hybrid. My last conversation with them there is some room up by the golf course and areas they've mentioned that they can still do two-way traffic because they have more space up there. And then where it gets tighter, they'll cut it down to one lane. Mm-hmm. And DOT is going to do a project next year, next fall, down by Western Auto when they replace that culvert. That's going to be 3 months. That's going to be one lane. So, we've been 3 months out here, one lane. Once we get past we need to have two lanes all the time, now they are open to a lot of different things. And they're just kind of waiting for the feedback from us to say, we want one lane traffic, whatever we need to do to keep the corridor small, keep the footprint small, so that MED doesn't have to move once, twice, whatever it needs to be. Minimal impact, I guess.
The state has also said that whatever we do at the rotaries, they said, will not alleviate our congestion during the busiest times of the summer. It is the way it is. And I point to Meredith, anybody who wants to go in July on a Saturday and go to Meredith, they've doubled their lanes going both directions along the waterfront. They've added street lights and they've added a rotary. Go there in July at 2 o'clock on a Saturday, and you're still in the same bumper-to-bumper traffic that you've always been in.
And DOT said that that's a failed intersection. There's nothing that can solve the intersection at Pickering Corners. So that's been stated a number of times.
Hi, Patty Cook. I apologize, I'm a little bit late getting here, so this may have been covered, but I want to get back up a minute about the streetscape and elimination of more green. As an example, as you drive north out of town, and after the church, it was all arbitrarily paved in front of Sutherland's and that whole strip. It's patchwork pavement, but in my opinion, it looks like, parking, and it's become more and more dangerous for parking like that. But I guess I'm asking, are we giving up trying to keep a rural green treescape here?
No, that's why we're talking about the telephone poles, and the moving of the telephone poles are the ones that are going to cut down, that we're going to have to cut down trees. And that was for two-lane traffic. We're trying to get to one-lane traffic to stop that from happening. We are not going to keep the green space between the sidewalk and the road, because when we looked at it, most of the green space isn't green anymore. It is a little bit of green with the gravel from the road, and that was what the board felt.
And so, no, that was not attributed, for example, up by Brewster, where there's no drainage and slope issues and all sorts. There's a lot of towns that have green between the street and over to a sidewalk, or at least have a motivation to try to keep as much green in. Downtown is getting hotter and hotter with fewer trees and less grass and everything else, but we're going to have a dramatically less rural feel the more that green's pulled out. And there are ways to manage it, so other towns have figured that out.
Betsy Andrews, you kind of clarified a little bit, so I'm going to just say it and fix it if I'm wrong. My understanding is if we keep it to a one-lane traffic while this is being done, it'll reduce or eliminate at least by half the number of telephone poles that need to be moved. So in In my mind, that should be a reduction of the $1.3 million that could cost us as taxpayers. Is that correct?
It'll reduce the amount that you will be paying in your electric rate. The electric department has its own rate, and all those things are covered. So my understanding, in order to do it out of the electric rates, there are other projects that we were going to do will not be done, and the moving of the trees will be done in its place. So at some point, that's going to catch up with us, or we're going to have to keep on pushing some of the conversion projects out further.
And with the keeping it to one lane, will that also reduce the number of trees?
That's what we believe.
Could it be zero, or is that just not feasible?
I think Brian brought a good point up. We've got some trees that are in the sidewalk that are going to be moved, and how far they're going to be moved.
So there will be some, no matter.
I would think so, but we want to make it the minimum that we can.
I do support the minimum impact. I appreciate you highlighting that there is a water quality issue. I must have missed that when I was reading. Very important to me that the lakes are protected, and this is just something that we need to deal with. So I'm a proponent of the minimal impact. My other question is there a deadline on the federal funding as to when it has to be, like, is it just going to hang there for us to tap whenever we get going, or are we on a strict timeline? I mean, things are changing in Washington. I wouldn't want to see that disappear after we make a decision.
This is coming through the state, so the state is the one.
So this is
It's the state all coming through. They're getting federal funding and through the state, and the state's doing the project. I can tell you that it was going to go from the Alton Town line all the way through. The money has shrunk, and the project keeps on going getting smaller. So there is a possibility by the time we get to construction, it could be even smaller.
So you can't lock in on this $10 million,
No.
even if we move right along quickly.
The state is going to move it along. It's out of our hand. We're just giving them to say, okay, this is the options we want. This is all going to be run through the state.
So is there any chance that if we decide to move forward, the state drags our feet, the money dwindles down, we're locked into an option, and we're footing the balance of the bill?
No, it's not going to be our bill.
No.
Not our bill.
What?
No matter what.
No, we won't do it. It's not on our project. This is the state's 10-year plan. If they can't fund the 10-year plan, we get nothing.
So tell me if I misspeak, Steve, but looking at the project, the minimum build should be less expensive than either using lights or rotaries or hand striping, just because the project is smaller. So if we do have, and it's because, like Linda said, it was to the Alton line at one time, but the $10 million that they propose over the years, it becomes worth less and less.
Right.
And so if we do a smaller build that is less expensive, we might be able to retain a longer portion of construction and get more for our dollar. But I know that they are right now doing their initial planning for the biggest project that we could ask for.
Okay.
I'm not sure which one that is, if it's the rotaries or the enhanced striping or whatnot, but
And then we were supposed to give them more definition.
Is there a hard stop on when we need to?
This was, when
Put a
this
stake
thing
in the ground?
first started, we would be in construction now.
Oh.
So this is working, it's been dragging on, now 2027 to 2029.
There we go.
Okay?
Hi, Bobby Budman again. Thank you so much for putting this forward to the people to let us decide on warrant articles. I just have one question about the warrant articles. I don't know what state RSA says, but can we take these to ranked choice voting? So we're not just voting sort of on a yes and no on them and taking it off, but the totals. Instead, can we do it ranked choice voting on the warrant
I
articles?
don't know, we'd have to look that up.
Okay.
I just, at this point, I don't know that. I had seen it as kind of separate, yes, no.
Yeah,
My
okay.
first choice is a Rotary at Pickering Corner, and then, or no, and then you go to the minimum build or whatever it is.
Okay.
But we haven't even, as a board, talked about it
Yeah,
yet. We know that we're going to do it, but we haven't gotten to that part. We needed some of this before we...
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that it's coming to the voters. Thank you.
I assume we'll try and be as concise with the warrant articles and as easily understood and follow, of course, the state's recommendations.
Is there anybody else?
Hi, Don Kretschmer, Red Brook Circle. So I've had the pleasure of having worked on most of the lakes in this area. I will say that the water quality improvements are much needed. And I would encourage the folks in this room, if it comes to a vote, and the selectmen, to stay away from the no action alternative, do nothing alternative, because for a couple reasons. First off, I think we really need it. We will not be able to raise this level of funding for water quality improvements anytime in the near future. And if we wait for DOT's next cycle, because we decided to do nothing here, it may be beyond some of our lifetimes before we actually can fix some of the problems here. Everything that comes down from the high school down ends up in either the Big Lake or Crescent Lake. Everything to the south of there ends up in Rust Pond or the Big Lake. Everything we do in this town ends up in the lakes that we swim in and recreate on. And as we well know, there have been water quality issues in recent years. And they've caused some recreation impacts and some impacts, I'm sure, to the businesses of the town, and that's the lifeblood. And I would really encourage folks to think carefully before throwing the whole project away. Yeah. The other thing I'll say is, I used to work, I had an office downtown until the pandemic, thought many times of riding my bike to work. It's only 3 miles. Did it a few times, have ridden through downtown, and decided that was a really bad idea. It's very unsafe. I mean, there's no shoulder there, traffic is moving pretty fast, and it's a scary proposition. I wouldn't want to let my kid do it if I wouldn't do it myself, and anything we can do to make that safer, the better. And the last piece I'm going to say is that, coming up, Auto-Wolfeboro Falls to Pickering Corner is a hair-raising experience. One of my neighbors got in a wreck there a number of years ago. Taking a left there is really difficult. So whatever we can do to make that the most safe possible solution, I'm all in favor of. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I have a question for Linda. Linda, is there an option to do nothing?
I think there's always an option to do nothing, but it's not one we've talked at length about.
I don't think the board has entertained a do nothing.
I would highly suggest against that
Yeah.
for a lot of what he said. If at this point, with the amount of time that the town has put into this, but also that DOT has put into this time and money that they've invested, if we were to just say no at this point, to get back on a 10-year plan again,
Yeah.
sometime would probably be
So I think you need
very difficult.
So I think you need to think carefully about how you word the warrant articles so that you don't have 4 options and all of them get voted down.
Yep.
Then we basically have a do nothing option.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Kathy Dragonfly. A lot of these notes I've taken because of what other people were saying, but I keep saying over and over again, we are sucking the quaint right out of us. Our town is just getting bigger and bigger, and we keep developing contemporary solutions, which is not what a historical town should do. I don't think it's going to change the quantity of the cars. I think you said that. Currently, in the summer, they back up from Shirley Gannam's house in Brewster there, all the way past the hospital. And I'm not exactly sure what a rotary would do to help that. One thing I've mentioned before, and I don't know if it's too late or not, but is there any way that we could bury the lines, our electric lines, and while the road is torn up, while we're doing new things, could we bury the lines? Do you know, Steve?
We got a quote to bury the lines from Pickering Corner to the Smith River Bridge, $17 million. Because it's just not the electric, it's all the other. We didn't even look for the quote going down this way, it's so much larger.
I was just thinking, while it's all torn up from the state, then maybe we could consider it just, if it's going to cost us $4 to $6 million to move all those poles and cut down the trees, why couldn't we use that same couple of million to do something we all like, or that will benefit the town? The other thing is to get easements on all those properties on South Main is going to be exceptionally difficult. When the town sued me for eminent domain, it took us 4 years to get through all the different courts until I won. And I just think if one person holds out, the whole project is going to be no good, because where are you going to put the poles other than crossing these easements? So when I bought the house, it had an easement, so it was no problem. I just had to renew it, but it can take years and years. So if you're looking at 4 or 5 years to do the legal stuff, you probably better start thinking about it now. And the trees, I'm not for that at all, taking down the trees. I feel like Dr. Seuss, you know, that the Lorax isn't going to like what we're doing. I am all for doing some of the other things, not necessarily a rotary, but the turning lanes, the bike lanes, the sidewalks, the water quality, that's all stuff we truly need, and it's not going to make us any less quaint. But if we do this big, huge project you're all talking about. Oh, and one last thing, speaking of history, which I was, Mark Lush, I think, put an article on Facebook last week that came from the Historical Society. And it was from 55 years ago, in 1970. And they were asking us the same questions, the same exact question. They wanted to put a rotary in 1970. And we've been talking about this for 55 years. You would think at some point somebody would hear us say no, but maybe not.
Barry, do you want to come up and kind of explain about the bearing of the electric lines?
Yeah. As you said, we got an estimate for the downtown, which was exorbitantly high and keeps going up. I think it was probably pushing 15 years ago where we looked at the price to go from Pickering Corner to the library. And I want to say that was close to $11 million, and I would not be surprised in today's monies if that's doubled now, just to go from here to the library. That would be well over $20 million. So,
and we're not just wiring the electric line. All the cable, all that has to go down. All the transformers we have to find places for that.
You have to get easements for these transformers. They have to be so far off the road because they're now within touch. You know, it's more than just, oh, they've got the road dug up, let's throw some pipe in. It's a lot of money. So we sort of took that off the table early. I know that came up a few times because, hey, yeah, well, we got the road dug up, you know, same thing with downtown here, but the price is just crazy. It's gone tremendously through the roof for underground, so.
Thank you. You got to do it on the, because people are at home need to hear this too, Kathy. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm just wondering if the price would be substantially different if we included the state in, they're going to do all the excavating and all of that. It sounds like all we're going to be doing is manipulating the telephone poles. Would it be substantially less expensive if we didn't have to do all that site work? It might be.
I don't see that being the case. There's sort of two different things, site work for roads and excavation and ditches for conduits and utilities. And the state has told us that they're not funding any of the utility work whatsoever. So the scope of anything to do with utilities is on us, so.
Okay, I've got one person behind you, and then you, Bill.
Good evening, Tony Fallon, 49 Center. Thank you for your letter of September. I really like that, appreciate it. I just wanted to read into the record, I emailed to Amy Capone-Muccio. I've got a client, friend, former director of campus planning at UNH, former civil engineering professor, who kind of first sold New Hampshire DOT on roundabouts. With regards to what is referred to as full-use corner in Rye, where you turn left at Market Basket on Lafayette Road and kind of head towards Odeon. Anyways, at the time, the state and the town were all kind of into doing a signaled intersection there that would have been 2 lanes in each direction. And he was successful in flipping both, a lot of the waves going forward for that. And he had a cute little, this is too small for you guys to see, but I'll read it off. A 2-column comparison of signalized versus roundabout, and which is better. Lo and behold, roundabout was all better. I'm just going to quickly read through what it's better with regards to. Frequency of collisions, severity of collisions, number of injuries, severity of injuries, traffic calming, that's good for that, pedestrian safety, bicycle safety, construction cost, maintenance cost, land consumed, asphalt expanse, delay time, queue time, sensitive to the neighborhood, sensitive to neighbors, noise pollution, braking noise, idling noise. I mean, everybody's trying to be energy efficient. You're not just queued up waiting for a red light. Air pollution, light pollution, longevity to failure, level of service, peak hours, level of service, off-peak, semi-rural gateway, aesthetic gateway, welcoming gateway. So I speak both for our 2-person household, Aaron and me, very much in favor of the roundabouts at both locations. And also, just parenthetically, I drive a long way to avoid a stoplight. I don't know why we would put one here. Thank you.
Thank you. Bill, you want to get back up?
Just a comment on the bearing of the lines. I was commenting on that earlier in the year when we were talking about doing this project downtown and hoping there'd be enough room to do that eventually. Obviously, it's a very expensive project. Just this short stretch, or South Maine would be much more, but there are towns in New Hampshire that have done this. In fact, we've done it down by the railroad station. You go to Newmarket, you go to Concord, their whole main street has buried lines. And I cannot believe, and even over at the Weirs have buried their lines. So it's possible to do, and it's possible to fund. You just have to know how to do it. And if we had a town planner that was planning, this sort of thing could be looked at as far as getting grants for this project. I don't think any town can afford $17 million to do a couple of tenths of a mile, if that. So there's got to be other ways to fund this. And if we looked into these other towns and how they did it, maybe we could find our way to do it, and that would certainly enhance the charming village atmosphere that we want to keep. If you go down and sit by the railroad station, it's absolutely gorgeous down there. There are no lines. It's beautiful. And I would let people know that they should go do that just to see what it looks like, because it's really great. And there's got to be a way to do it at some point, you know. And hopefully they did leave enough room down here. But when I saw them going across the street this way in several spots, I don't know how you'd weave the electric lines down through there, but hopefully it would happen in the future. But I think there are ways to do it.
Come on up.
Not good at talking into these things. Okay, I'm Karen Burnett-Curie, and I think I'm going to offer a slightly different perspective here. I think when we talk about being a quaint village, we're not thinking about what we look like when the traffic is sitting there backed up to the hospital or beyond. I mean, we don't look quaint then. And I think all of the traffic sitting there spewing exhaust into the air doesn't make us quaint. And I don't think that I think some of what we're referring to is what we remember, not what is actually happening. And while they may have been talking about a light or a circle back in the 70s, the problem has obviously become accentuated or much worse. So the question of whether or not standing traffic is better than a light, or, you know, other options like a turn lane, seems to me to be somewhat reminiscent. I mean, it's past its time. I think the other thing to realize is that trees are taken down. It used to be 100 years ago, New Hampshire was about 20% forested and 80% without trees. Now we're approximately 80% forested and 20% without trees. So I think losing a few trees, especially if it's in front of your house, like I just did, I cut one down and planted ones further back from the road. It is possible to replace trees, and they can be even replaced large size if that's of particular interest to somebody who has a tree cut in front of their house. We also all lived, or not all of us, but some of us lived during elm disease, where we all had street lines with elm trees, and those died, and we've survived the transition. So I think we need to be more practical in thinking about the fact that we don't want to encourage sprawl. We don't want to encourage people taking alternative routes with, it didn't occur to me how many big trucks travel this road, 28 and South Main Street, till I was doing visibility during the campaign and watch the big log trucks and the cement trucks and the huge number of trucks that travel through here. And I think we need to figure out how better to accommodate that. And losing 5 parking spaces in front of the church in order to create a true passing lane, because right now people do that. At Pickering Corner, they move over towards the center line, and then a lot of cars travel to the right. And if you can create that turn lane and that traffic lane more safely, that travel lane more safely, then I think that's worth really considering, and not thinking that it's not widening the road the whole way, it's widening the road at the 2 pinch points, which in my estimation makes absolute sense. I think it also makes sense to do a testing of a street light, a directional light or whatever, or even, I'm not a traffic expert, I don't have any experience in this, but a blinking light. There are intersections that have yellow blinking and red blinking lights. Why do they do that? I mean, there must be some research out there that tells you there's safety and some advantage to having lights like that. Now, I'm assuming that if there were an actual 3-way light, that would actually be a blinking and a yellow light during most of the time and would only be used directionally for the busy times of the day. that's just an assumption on my part. It seems obvious to me that it's not necessary to have the traffic light operating all the time, or even all year round. But it's certainly useful during certain times of the day and certain times of the year. And that we should not think that we can maintain Wolfeboro in its past glory. We've had buildings burned down, we've had the post office be built in the, I mean, you know, there have been demonstrative changes that have taken place that we now consider part of our quaintness, and this could be done in such a way that it would still allow us to be quaint, and yet we would improve traffic, and we would not have the backups that we have now. Thank you.
So I agree with you in a lot of what you said. I have read old documents that say in the late 1800s, people were complaining about there was no room for their horses and carriages to get through town or to park their horses and carriages. So this has gone on for a long time. I also know that I've been to a lot of different resort areas, Nantucket, Martha's Vineyard, Newburyport, and they all have the same gridlock in the summer that we have. You wait in bumper-to-bumper traffic no matter where you are. And I don't know if we can hang our hat on it, but the state has said to us at multiple meetings that it doesn't matter what we choose for an option during our busiest times of the summer, we're going to have gridlock. You can only get 20,000 people through a town that 6,700 people live in so quickly when they're all there at the same time. It's logistics.
Is there anybody else? Nope.
I absolutely agree that you're not going to change the fact that there's only going to be one lane in one direction downtown and one lane in the other and all those crosswalks. Yeah. So, you know, you're not going to change that. But there are a lot of cars that come up 28 or Center Street and turn left, lots and lots of them, that never go through downtown. And if you can make that transition smoother during the really busy times, then people aren't experiencing 3 points of choke points. So if there's one at Pleasant Valley and the high school, and then there's one again at Pickering Corner, and then there's one again downtown, I think that there's cause for considering eliminating at least 1 or 2 of those choice. Yeah. And you can't do anything about downtown. I get it. Yeah. I get it.
Hey, Steve, have they done car counts, the state? Can you explain them a little?
So if you go onto the DOT website and you look at this project, they have the simulations that they've run from the car counts, and they run simulations through every one of these options, through, you know, from signal to minimum to roundabout, and it shows you how the traffic would flow in real time in real cars. I can't quote the car count off the top of my head.
Have they done car counts to see the difference in the traffic that comes 28 up to Pickering Corner from Ossipee and from the north and south on Main Street?
I believe they've done every which way that you could think of. The data is all in that. So if you go to the DOT website, and I think we actually have a link on our website to get to that project, to get to all of that information.
Yep.
So that would help some people when they're looking at it to say, okay, I see a lot of traffic coming this way, or I see a lot of, because everybody perceives things differently. If I'm always coming through town one way, I look at it differently than somebody who's coming up 28 or coming from a different direction. So it might be good to look at those things, and it might help you say, oh, okay, so most of our traffic, and I don't know them, most of our traffic comes this direction or this direction or this direction. This is why the state is looking at these options.
Yeah, and when you go on, there's a square box, and there are 4 squares in the square box, and you can take a look at the traffic light, the roundabout, and then it does the same for Pickering. I've looked at that a couple times, so if you really want to get a visual, that's a good place to go.
Hi, Charlie Anderson. I actually did that exercise. I went on and I watched those videos. And it's not like an Andy Warhol movie like Empire State where you watch it for 24 hours. But that's sort of the point as well. Because what I was able to see in watching it for 10 minutes or whatever I did was a normal flow of traffic. They never seemed to vary. So it doesn't really address choke points, pinch points. It doesn't address high volumes, doesn't address when the school gets out, or Brewster or anybody like that, or the poor people trying to cross the road from the golf course to go from hole 6 to the next hole, right? So it's a little bit misleading in terms of that. Certainly doesn't address summer versus, another time of the year when you might have less volume of traffic. So it's interesting and it's a nice exercise, but it doesn't really talk, I think, to this.
So if they had done it the way that you and I are thinking, with all the cars there at the same time, it would have been 4 pictures of a parking lot.
That's right.
Absolutely.
with the buses coming out like this. Right?
Yeah.
Which is, I think, is the reason why they did it the way they did, which was take an average to do what it is for most of the time.
Yeah.
And I think most people have said it. Brian said it a couple times. July and August, doesn't matter what you do. Right. It's going to be a mess. When the school gets out, it is what it is. All those times, that just is. It's the rest of the time. Can it improve? What can improve it? Or so on and so forth.
True story, when I go to Meredith in the summer, I go by boat.
Yeah.
Don't go by car.
Well, I'm not sure it would be exactly the same. I'm not sure that you're going to eliminate the backup of traffic, but if somebody used Meredith as the example,
Yep.
and Meredith, before they had that left-hand turn lane and they changed the way that one road comes in just past the movie theater, that was much worse than it is now. So yes, Meredith is still a backup, but it's not as bad as it used to be. And that's because they created, in a very small amount of space, 2 lanes, a turn lane and a straight lane, which is also the right lane. And that has actually helped. No, it hasn't cured it, but it's helped a lot.
Yeah. Agreed.
Jody?
Jody Person. So quickly, it just seems like this project is morphing to more of away from a traffic fixing situation to water quality, road condition, sidewalk condition. I'm just trying to come away with it tonight, so.
They have all been there.
Yeah.
And you can see on all these drawings
Yeah.
where they're retention basins, it's the way the state goes about their project.
Yeah.
Now they're doing the right-of-way. They told us they wouldn't be able to, for quite a while, tell us exactly where the retention basins were going to
Yeah.
be. They had to get a part of it. The sidewalks have always been there,
Yeah.
improving, and so has the bike lane been there.
I'm just trying to come out of here because, like, in the town, the word of mouth is the biggest thing. So, like, tomorrow, when
water
I start
quality.
talking with people,
Yes.
everybody was really upset in the beginning with the cost. Now I'm seeing it morph down to less cost for the taxpayer. I just want to
I think that if we don't have to move all the poles, that's correct in
Yeah.
our electric rates. And I think the water quality, that's a very good point. That is with what's going on today with our lakes, it's a significant thing for us to have
Okay.
dealt with.
I just wanted to be able to go out and talk to people I talk to, but I guess the other request is, I don't know if you guys would mind, maybe each one of you just quickly talk on how you feel at this time on the project and what your feelings are, maybe quick. Do we have time for that, maybe?
I'll take
him as an expert, maybe just a quick thing, because I know a couple of you were against this in the beginning, and now it seems like we've morphed to everything, so
I'm more than willing to do that at the end. I'm not ready because I also have something I need to read from somebody who wanted me, and I want to make sure all the questions, but we will do it before, if people want to,
that's
before
fine.
we leave.
I mean, he's the expert too. I'd like to hear from him in the end. Yeah.
Is anybody else in the audience want to make any more comments?
Not a comment, but just was wondering, what's the likelihood that the state would put a temporary traffic light, just to get a feel for what that looks like?
It's on my list of questions that Steve can go ask. I think it's well worth asking that question.
Just giving some empirical evidence, that's all.
So and I brought this up at least one meeting. I have a niece who has a PhD in municipal roadway planning, and she has said that there is a program, a federal program, I believe there's federal dollars for it, where you can actually build a temporary rotary. They put down rubber mats and draw lines and simulate a rotary. So if we can get the state to help us with that, we could actually put a simulated rotary in either of those locations and see what happens. Yes.
Steve, there's another question you can ask.
So I will certainly, like I said, I've been keeping a list of questions and the ones I'll forward to DOT. I can say probably on both of those, I'm not going to answer for them, but I will say their response is probably going to be, it's going to depend on space. So if you look at the layouts, so part of the roads have to change in order to accommodate a roundabout or to accommodate streetlights. So it's not just as easy as putting rubber mats down or throwing up the templates, because there is spacing involved in that, but I will 100% pass that along, see if I can get an answer next week or so.
Anybody else? Okay.
Dave Bolduc, I have a question and a comment, I guess. You mentioned that you were putting several warrant articles together. First question, I get the question is, will the decision of the warrant articles now then determine your selection for what we're going to do, or is that you just getting another point of view at that way? The reason for asking that is I view you guys as visionaries for the town, and I don't have a lot of faith that the electorate has a vision for our town so much as wanting to protect their pocketbooks and not wanting change. So I would advocate for you guys. You guys have listened to the studies. You know what systems work best. You know what's the best answer long-term for the town. Do your job and suggest the right thing for the town for now and in 20 years. Because the electorate is not going to want change. They're not going to want to have their tax base affected anyway. And I just think that it's unusual for the towns, for townsfolks to make decisions on critical things like this in other towns. This is unusual. According to DOT, this is an unusual move that we're doing involving the electorate. And maybe there's a reason to talk that over with you guys and see if that's really necessary.
Well, I guess I'll kind of do it with this town hall. We had many different options that came on and to try to come to a conclusion and get a majority or get 60% to renovate this hall. And I think it took us 2 or 3 years. And there were multiple warrant articles, some asking for choices. And in the end, we were able to come to a conclusion. So I guess I do believe that input for the public is important. I'm here to do what the citizens want. I will take that feedback and then make my decision based on what the majority of you want.
Okay.
And I would say this too. The state has not come to us and said, this is the best way to build it, let's build it. They've said, here's 4 options, which one are you gonna choose? I'm not I don't have a PhD in roadway engineering and municipal planning. Paul doesn't, Linda doesn't. Brad does have a lot of construction experience in roadways. Dave has some experience, and Steve does. But I don't know how 100% we are qualified to look down the road and determine, without a definitive answer from the state, what's the best thing to do, especially when the state has told us that none of the solutions are going to alleviate the problem, and they've been very adamant about that so that we're not disappointed.
I understand that,
Yeah.
but they have told you what systems continuously would move the traffic faster than it is now. You have that answer, and that's the rotary. I understand that has the most controversy in town, but you have that information.
And I think they said that's the safest also. Brad? Is that about the rotary?
Yep. Yep. I mean, because we're getting, if I understand correctly, our costs are directly tied to the electrical lines which need to be moved. So if we ask for a plan that is more involved, it doesn't cost us anymore because it's state money.
Well, the only thing is, the larger the project, the more poles we have to move, the more dollars come out of our pocket for electric poles.
Right. I
So
understand.
it could be the difference between $3 million or $4 million and less than $1 million. So, I mean, several $1 million could be the difference depending on which plan we choose.
Okay. Well,
May I?
I thank you.
Is there anybody else who'd like, Bill? Oh, okay, sorry.
A question for Steve. As far as the traffic light goes at Pickering Corner, when I've thought about that, neither good nor bad, I'm just thinking, if you have a traffic light there, what's the impact going to be down at the bottom of Brickyard Hill, that intersection? Can you ask the state if, based on traffic counts, would you need a second light down there?
I wouldn't think I'll ask the question, yes. I'd like to just, if I may, just to clarify something that Brian said. In talking about costing and polls and things of that nature, and Barry, please, if I'm speaking out of school, please speak up, but there's two parts of this conversation I think that might be getting a little overlapped. One are the intersections, and two is the corridor. So the majority of the polls is corridor work, and that is 1 lane, 2 lane, depending on how we do that. The impact as far as polls on the intersections, I don't think is that drastic.
No.
So that's not $1.2 million to move the poles, whether you do a roundabout or stoplights. So I don't want that to get blended in there. Mm-hmm. So whether it be minimum build, if we talk about minimum build, it's minimum build in the intersections. The corridor is what the corridor is, like we said before. So that, what's going to affect that money and what Barry's cost is driven by how many lanes we use, whether we keep the 1 or the 2 or however that is. But it's the intersections are a different animal. And I think that's what the point of this is trying to narrow down the intersections, so to not get off track on that too much.
Come on. Yep, nope, that's why we're here.
Since we're talking about traffic lights, I don't know if it's still possible, but earlier in the evening, I noticed that there was a screen that showed a modern traffic light. And I want the town to understand that you're not going to have a traffic light with a quaint little light in the middle of, hanging from a wire in the middle. This is going to be a huge pole we're going to have that. Is that really what you think is going to be maintain the quaintness of our town?
You're going to have 3 of those. 3 of them. You'll have 3 of those.
And also transformers that we have some issues with one of the, let's see, it's not Three Sisters, the corner store.
So you should include that information right there, that picture, when you're trying to talk to people about the benefits and the negatives of having a traffic light, because that will ruin Pickering Corner forever for me.
If I'm understanding these diagrams here, we're going to have a lane and a turn lane at most. That represents a 4-lane road coming in, and it has a 4-lane road it's intersecting with a cement barrier down the middle. I understand that having a travel lane and a turn lane widens it, but it's not going to be that. It's not going to have that width of shoulder. It's not going to have a cement barrier. I think that's a little...
I think what he's talking about is the metal coming up. It's going to
and
be
I don't think it's going to be that big. I mean, we've all traveled in Meredith. Does anyone remember seeing the traffic light in Meredith looking like that?
I think what we will do is we tried to find a picture of a traffic light. That's what we found today. We need to go to Meredith and take a picture.
Yeah.
And that's what we should use.
Yeah.
So I'd like to just point this out here. So this is the traffic light version that is over there. and you'll see the tower with the 3 lights here, here, and here. So it has to span that much distance. So there's 3 towers with 3 lights. The whole point of putting that one in is to make sure that people understand it's not just a cable across with the one light that used to hang, which is what a lot of communication has been around town. Well, we could just run a cable with a thing across. We have a blinking light there, we can put something else. That's not what this is. There will be a tower with an arm that spans that distance. So the other one that is, I mean, because this really is, by the time you have here, you have 3 lanes here, plus then you have all the shoulders and the entranceways. That is quite wide. That's why we lose all the parking on this side of the road, is how much road we're going to gain through
but
there.
the parking you lose is all pavement now anyway. So you're not widening the amount of pavement in any place excepting at the points where you have created the turn lane, which isn't, I mean, anyway. My question is, has anyone talked to the people who are being affected by the intersection now? And that is the people who live on Leonard Street, and I always pronounce that wrong, so Bobby can correct me.
Me too.
And the other street where people turn, I mean, I do both of them, you know, going past the barber and around towards the hospital, because I avoid that intersection by doing those alternative routes. And I think that we understand people will vote differently depending upon whether they have to go through that intersection at the busiest times because of their commute, or whether or not they have to go into town and aren't the people that can say, well, I don't go through town in the summertime between the hours of 2 and 4, or whatever they say. But we're also impacting the neighborhoods that are on the roads that people are using as alternative routes.
Okay, is there anybody else? I do have an email that I will read. I was asked by Mike Vogel to read this into the minutes. With all due respect, we have been given 4 options from the state for each intersection from Pickering Corner to Pleasant Valley Road. If the animations they have given are accurate, the citizens should be made aware of the animations and the making of the choice for both intersections with warrant articles. This board agreed we citizens will make the final choice during the meeting concerning how the letter of intent would be written for the state to proceed with planning. I have heard that you plan to narrow down the choices to only 2 for each intersection and simplification of the warrant articles by discussion and vote at this meeting. That does not satisfy what you had previously promised, that the citizens, not a small group, make the ultimate decision via warrant articles. I find it interesting and important that the state animations do not give the same 4 options for both intersections. Obviously, the as-is Serno, I killed that one, do nothing for the Center Street folks turning left onto Main Street, and it does not show a true need to do anything at the school. The all-stop scenario simply slows down all the traffic needlessly, and there will be a backup line problem from all directions. Since 2 intersections have different choices to accomplish what is needed, we, the citizens, need to vote on each intersection with all 4 options from the state. The citizens need to make the decision whether or not to sacrifice all of those old-grown trees being cut down and poles moved temporarily just to maintain two-way traffic during construction too. We will be required to vote on the spending millions of our town funds to do this, unless it's decided against in planning. It shouldn't be all that bad to have 1-lane traffic. Please have the citizens that you represent make a big decision as you promised. Sincerely, Mike Vogel, Wolfeboro. So is there anybody else who would like to? Okay, come on.
All right. We just had an election. In that election, each voter that vote had a ballot in their hand. 4,488, I think, is the number. Were to vote for 3 House representatives, 2 in District 6 and 1 in District 7. 1,500 people didn't vote for 2 in District 6, or, 500 didn't vote in District 7. So I think when you give people too many options, you're not going to get a vote of representative of the population. It's too complicated. It's too many options. And it's like the idea of ranked voting. At least you get an idea of where they fall in their preferences. But 1,500 out of 4,800 is 30% who didn't, they had a ballot in their hand and they didn't make a choice.
So I agree with ranked voting, and it's important, but the thing that you can't forget about is bullet voting. And a lot of people, when they voted, they intentionally didn't vote for more than one person because they only wanted one choice. So the 1,500, there may be some mistakes, but it may be a lot of people that say, that's it.
Okay, this doesn't have anything, it's getting late. Afterwards, the 2 of you can go out in the hall and do it. But what we did promise that we would go through and tell you kind of where we were.
Yep.
And Brian is anxious to start, so I'll start with Brian.
Yeah, so I will say what I said from the very beginning when this came forward to me. If 5 of us vote to choose an option for either location, and it's a split vote of 2 and 2, then one select board member decides what the town's roadway will look like for the next 50 years. And I don't like the way that sits in my stomach. Yes, we were elected to represent you, but representing you is also giving you a voice, especially when it's something as important as this and the aesthetics and the cost of the project. It's something that once it's there is going to be there for perpetuity. And so I believe that it doesn't personally matter what I think, it matters what the voters think.
Brian, I think you were I thought you had asked us to decide on which intersections we were. I just want to make sure that, yeah.
State your question.
No, I just thought if each of you could just say what you feel at this time on the project since it morphed. Like I said before, there was a couple of you that weren't for it at all, but now it seems like there's a consensus that you guys are pretty much.
So let me.
So just if you can explain where you're at this time.
Brian, I'll come back. Let's go on to Paul because you gave yours. Paul?
Thank you. So I was around during the 2018 period when this question was discussed, and I invite you all to read, if you haven't done it, please read the letter that went off to the state. It's on the DOT website. Not much has changed since 2018. We're still in the same scrum. Here's the things I worried about then and I worry about now. I really hate the idea of moving traffic closer to pedestrians. So that tells me I probably don't want more travel lanes. I don't know how to fix that. That troubles me a little bit. I accept the fact that in the middle of the summertime, a roundabout is a failed idea. It's just not going to work. It just doesn't work. And DOT has told us that. It gets gummed up. It's because everybody wants to cross the street to go to Bailey's Bubble or wherever they want to go. It happens. So I kind of say the roundabout's a bad idea then. But I look at traffic in the morning and in the afternoon when the trades and folks are trying to get to and fro work, and they're all gummed up trying to be polite to each other, and sometimes it works, and most of the times it really doesn't work. So that says to me, Jesus, a roundabout probably is not a bad idea. I don't know. I hate the idea of taking down trees, and this was a new revelation of a double move on the poles. To me, I'm going to use an S word, that is a sucky option. But we have to, I don't like that because trees take a long time to come back. And I do respectfully say, you take down trees, you are changing the look and feel of the town. I'm troubled by that a lot. And I was the one actually, and I think we all talked about it, I was the one that said, let's whittle this thing down to some rational choices. And, you know, we as select people will get back together and do that again as to what the right options are here. I side with Bill Swaffield. I used to work on a business where we laid cables all over the planet. It can be done. We can run cables everywhere if we have the stomach and the muscle to pony up a pretty substantial amount of money and the creativity to think about how you do that. And Barry is very, very smart at telling us the complexities just his little slice of heaven has to deal with, not to mention all the internet service providers that are running their stuff transiting through our town and off into Tuftonboro or in the other direction. So where do I come out on all this? I'm somewhere between a roundabout and what would be called a mini build. It's kind of where I am right now, and I'm gonna probably have to have a couple of glasses of whatever as we get closer and closer to this. I don't think traffic lights are a workable solution. I think that was a scary visual, but I just don't like scary visuals because they could be close, that gantry hanging over. You know, the next thing we might want to do is put easy pass things over. That would be, holy shit, that would not be smart. I'm not a big believer in the traffic light thing, and I'm definitely not a big believer in the do nothing thing because, as was mentioned here, lightly, and was mentioned as well, and I shouldn't say lightly, it was mentioned here and mentioned in the previous thing, our water quality challenges are big problems here. Dave Ford, the predecessor to Steve, made a comment, you know, every so often these things stick in my head. He said, every square inch of land in this town is watershed to some lake. And it is scary to think about all that drippy stuff that finds its way into lakes. So water quality is important. So do nothing to me is not an option. So whoever said don't do nothing, who was it that said don't do nothing? That's not an option, all right? So I'm somewhere between the mini build and the roundabout. It's kind of where I'm at. And down at McManus, I'm kind of not a fan of a roundabout down there. This is a microscopic problem to me, and I think it happens during school time. The only thing that countervenes my thinking on that is I do worry about students who just got their driver's license trying to figure out how to get out of school, and there are crashes or attempted crashes, and Captain Livy can help us with that. So, but I think we can manage that. So I would not be a big believer at this point of saying roundabout down there. I'd be thinking a mini construction, something down there. Okay, that's kind of where I am. Thank you.
Well, from the beginning, our first meetings were up at the junior high or middle school. And I have always been in favor of not doing much up here on the corner. I've been mostly interested in enhanced striping and that kind of thing. Till I started seeing these things come out, which you have tonight. And I wish you would look through them. Because when I started looking through them closer every time we got a new one, we started losing traffic spaces for parking. And I don't think that's a good thing here in town. I think most of us would agree there aren't enough, and we have parking spaces, and a lot of them, even if you go down behind Lana Street, that parking lot gets pretty full now during the summertime. So I have leaned, and Mr. Harriman and I have had many discussions about this. I'm leaning more towards roundabout here, not at McManus Road. I think McManus Road, we were told tonight, I think some of you might see it. If you get there at 2:30, there's a police officer at both exits, and it seems to take care of itself. The water quality, I think, is important. If you look at these, there's a major detention pond on Christian Ridge Road and one up by Pleasant Valley Road. Those to me are important. So I'm leaning towards the roundabout. If it doesn't work, it can be removed because this is a miniature, quote, miniature style, which you can drive over, similar to the one, they have one in Plymouth, if you've ever been up there. On the northern end of the town, there is a mini roundabout which services 4 roads. That one I don't have a problem with. And I think that would be the least destructive as far as the trees and so forth. And Barry, I know, told us a few meetings ago that he has submitted his plan to the state. They didn't have any plan about where the power lines were going to go, what had to be cut. But we are going to be responsible as a town for replacement of any trees that got cut down. We did find out at one of our meetings with the state, we are not going to be responsible for the sidewalks and the drainage as they had first told us. So that's a plus. We don't have to bear the cost of that, but we will have to bear the cost of replacing of trees. So that's a big deal. As Barry has said, he has pictures of where sidewalks and where poles are going to be, as far as possibility of. So my thought is that the compact roundabout would be in the best interest of the corridor, of parking, and of destruction of trees and stuff, from what I've seen from the beginning of this project. So that's where I stand.
Brad?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, Dave, you surprised me with that you finally agreed with me on that. For a couple of years we've been talking about that, but quite a few. I did want to also comment, and I appreciate Steve bringing up the fact that, and I think I stated this a few meetings ago, that the bulk of this project, dollar-wise, is geared towards the rebuilding and drainage improvements of South Main Street. Big proponent of that. Obviously, the detention basins down at on Christian Ridge Road and Pleasant Valley Road are big to protect our lakes and stuff there. So that's all, highly positive things for this whole project. Plus getting rid of that old cement road. As you all know, the last few years has been pretty good out there, but we've had some years where once you get some of that heaving there, all those cracks seem to open up again, then the potholes come up, and anybody that lives along that road will hear the constant pounding of the trucks as they come down through there, and it's hard on the cars, the front ends and all that stuff. It's just a rough road to be on. So this rebuilding will remove all of that. It'll take the concrete out, rebuild the road, and have a nice road like we did down on Center Street a few years ago. So definitely all proponents, positive things on that. I am in favor of the roundabout here at Pickering Corner. One thing that hasn't been brought up about that, one of the biggest things I've learned about roundabouts in my years of doing this is the safety issues there. Pedestrians, right now, if a pedestrian wants to cross from the corner store over toward the monument, toward Brewster Academy, they have to cross through 3 lanes of traffic. They have to be looking to the right and to the left, and also coming out of Center Street if they're coming around to the right, so their heads are on a swivel the whole time coming up through there. With the roundabout, there are, I call them islands in the middle of those. There's going to be raised directional islands there to bring the traffic, to start them on a little bit of a curve there. That gives the pedestrian, only has to cross 1 lane of traffic, can come to a stop in the middle, then contemplate and look down the other lane of traffic to get to the other side. And that would also play in effect coming across from 3 Sisters across, whereas now they're supposed to go from 3 Sisters to the corner store and then cross over Main Street. So it's a huge safety improvement for the pedestrians in that whole area. As far as traffic accidents go, granted, it's a very slow-moving area there, but you can get people pulling onto Center Street, can get T-boned by a car, either heading into town or out of town, crash into a door, side door of the driver's side or something like that with a roundabout. It tends to have the cars who are going to be somewhat pointed in the same direction. They're going to be on an angle with each other, so it's going to be more of a fender bender type thing. Going to be less chance of bodily injury or if you do have an accident there. So for those reasons, I'm a proponent of the roundabout here at Pickering Corner. We all know that no matter what we do, when there's traffic is backed up through from downtown up through there, nothing is going to work. The lights aren't going to work, the no bill isn't going to work, and the roundabout isn't going to work. We have to rely on people's courtesy to not plug the intersection when it's backed up through there, no matter which design we go with here. As far as McManus Road, I'm in favor of probably doing some enhanced striping up there. I think, as Bill had pointed out, it's probably about 20-25 minutes in the morning and in the afternoon when the school's getting, kids coming in and kids are leaving, that is very busy there. And we've got to keep in mind that that's during the school year, so that's not during the summertime when we have our heavy traffic flow, and it's not on weekends. So I think, I don't think that's really a major issue for us to have to go with a roundabout and a major intersection change up there. I think that addresses about all of those there. So that's kind of my thoughts at this time on where I'm at with this project.
Okay, I guess I started coming from the point of view of wanting to keep the unique rural character of our town. That's always been very important to me. And so when I heard about the trees, that started me really looking at the impact that could take place here and how do I balance the need for safety, the fixing of the road, and still keeping that there. I'm a tree hugger, so cutting down a tree just is hard for me to do. I live out in the woods, so trees are important. Water quality. I'm the chair of Wolfeboro Waters. We have kept an eye on the water quality here. We've tried to get them to tell us whether we're going to get all 3 retention basins, 2, 1. So we're on that. That is very important. I think that's a very important piece that we make sure that we talk to the public about. A traffic light has never been an option for me. I've traveled down South Main Street into town all the time, and I remember the time when we decided to change the water line, and we stopped traffic and to order to get that line across, and at a peak time, we gridlocked the whole town. Nobody could get out of any road anywhere, and I'll tell you, there were a lot of very angry people. So I'm concerned about a traffic light, us getting to the point with downtown not moving, that goes through a cycle that we could get backed up all the way to who knows where, maybe up to the high school. Sometimes we are up there. So I've bounced back and forth between the mini build and the compact roundabout, but I've kind of come to the conclusion that I believe that the compact roundabout is the best. And one of the main drivers for me on that is the safety. If as a selectman, one of the things that we're supposed to do is worry about the safety of the citizens, and that to me is taking that responsibility. So that's where I am on that. I do believe that I would like to put warrant articles out. I'd like to get a sense from the public and from the citizens on what they feel is the most important. As I said before, my job is to sense what the public wants to do and vote that way, not what I personally want to do. So that's why I backed Brian when he brought that up. I thought that was a great idea. McManus Road, a mini build. It works. There's no need to spend a whole lot of money. And in fact, I'd like to take the money from that and do another retention basin, and I've made that comment before. So the mini build, and when I look at the corridor, there is a real need for a bike lane. You want to drive down in the middle of the summer with somebody riding a bike up Route 28 and trying to decide, do I stay behind? Do I get enough space to go around? Is that enough space? I think that, again, is another safety issue, and so to me, that's a very important thing. And that's where I am. Brian, I think you may want to add a little more.
Well, yeah, what I want to do is I want to answer Jody's question, because Dave Senecal did answer his question. I didn't answer his question because I didn't understand the question that was asked to me. And now I do when he asked it a second time. Originally, there was some pushback from the board saying maybe we shouldn't do anything. And as Dave said, it was when originally we thought we were going to have to pay for the drainage, we were going to have to pay for the sidewalks, and we were going to have 2 lanes of traffic both directions, which was going to be a huge expense with the electric poles. When the state kind of surprised us, but let us know, no. We were always going to do the drainage, and we were always going to do the sidewalks. It made the project much more affordable. Then when the state kind of swerved a little bit again and said, you can do only 1 lane of traffic if you want, there was more savings there. So I think as a board, and I don't want to speak for them, but me personally, I was definitely on board 100% when all of a sudden we had more control over the project and the cost was going incrementally down. I also want to make sure that we don't have some confusion. Anybody who wants to look at the Plymouth Rotary, go look at it. There's asphalt in both directions for a half a mile. It's in the middle of a very congested area right by the college. If you're going to compare apples to apples, compare apples to apples, that's apples to oranges. That's a much different. There's 4 large roadways going onto that roundabout. We have 3 smaller roadways going on to ours. I refer back again to my niece, who has a PhD in municipal planning, and she said it's very unusual to have a compact roundabout in a location where traffic is moving slow and you have only 3 access points going to it. You very rarely see a roundabout with only 3 access points going onto it. Again, me personally, doesn't matter if I want a roundabout or if I want a mini build or whatnot. It matters what the voters want. Pedestrian injuries, we've had our police department speak at meetings at least a couple times, and they say that they have not had any major traffic accidents or pedestrian injuries or bike injuries at Pickering Corner. So we can hang our hat on, save the kids, save the children, save the people, but we got to look at the facts. Those intersections are not these harrowing, dangerous places where everybody's going to get run over. It hasn't happened before, and it won't happen going forward. But I still will always hang my hat on that it's going to change the rural character of the town in one way or another. Some people will think it's positive, having the look of a roundabout. Some people will have being negative. But I believe majorities should decide.
Okay, I want to thank you all for coming tonight, giving us the input. If you know people who have questions, please have them contact one of us as a selectman. We will, from time to time, get these boards up so people can come in and take a look at them. So thank you for your time with us tonight.
Would you like a motion to adjourn?
Yes, will you give me a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Dave, do I have a second? Any further discussion? All those
Aye.
in favor? We're out of here.
Roundabout 1.
Yeah.
Minimum build 2.
Yeah. Okay.
Did you?